Hi everybody, my name is Kayla Ward. I'm a community health promoter at Musqueam Public Health. Today I'm going to show you a simple little video on how to make a ribbon skirt with the ribbon skirt kits that we've provided you. So it's just, I had took mine out already just to prep, but it's just the bag with the fabric and the ribbons and the elastic. I'm going to show you how to make it one of two ways. So the first way is just simple. This is just one of my own personal skirts, but it's just the material with the ribbons and nothing on the sides. And I'm also going to show you this way because this is how I'm going to make my demo with the ribbons hanging off the side. So yeah, so the first thing you're going to do is take your fabric to measure yourself. If I can get it open. So you're going to want to open it up the long way. Well, I don't know. And you're going to hold it around your body. So it's going to be a bit big depending on the fabric that you have. Whichever way will wrap around your body best. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a step forward. That's how you're going to measure how much fabric you need. So you're going to grab the one corner side and then you're going to bring the other side to meet where your toe is. You want to take a big enough step so that you'll have enough skirt for your stride. You don't want to be like walking like a penguin. You want to have room to walk freely. So that's why you take that step forward. So bring the end together, and then this is where you'll cut it. So see, I'll have this piece of extra fabric left. So I'm just going to keep my hand there. And then you're going to fold it to where it was. Then you'll lay it down, and then you're going to cut all along, and this piece here is your extra fabric. So you're just going to cut along, and this isn't the material I'm using. I'm actually using this, and I've done a little bit of prep work, so I've cut it already. So once you cut the piece that you're using, you'll have this piece here. Once you cut that out, you're going to want to cut it on the fold, so it's in half, and then it's two pieces, so one for the front and one for the back. So that's what I've done here. I've cut mine out already. So this is one piece, my front piece, and the other piece is the exact same. So one's for the front and one's for the back. And depending on how long you want it, you'll have to adjust it later. But I usually do the bottom hem first and then go from there. So once I do the hem, I usually fold it an inch and then an inch again, or I go with this little piece of white as a guide. And if you didn't know already, each material has this little kind of color scheme, I don't know what you call it, on the bottom. And those are like suggested colors that would go great with your fabric. So you can use this as a guide for your ribbons whenever you're choosing a skirt. So what I do, I'll fold it just on this white part here. And then I'll pin it. You can use an iron if you want. I usually just use my little pins, less work. So I usually do 4, or you can use more, you can use less, whatever you think will work best for you. So I do it once. Oops. And then I'll fold it over one more time. So I'll just take the pin out, fold it over again, and just make sure it's even all the way across. Otherwise, your two pieces won't match up, your front piece and your back piece. And everybody does theirs their own way. This is just the way that I find the easiest and how I always do mine. And I never have any problems. So there. Once you have it pinned, you're gonna take both sides, do the front and the back, and then you'll go to sew it. So once you're ready to sew, depending on the kind of machine that you have, there's little markers here. They're just measurements. I just pick whatever line that I like. Honestly, just make it super easy, and I'll line up the edge with it. And I think Where I have it is a good enough space. And then I'm just gonna sew straight all the way along. And don't forget to backstitch, that way you have a less chance of your thread coming undone and your skirt coming apart. So. And you always want to make sure to take your pins out. If you run over your pins with your sewing machine, you might break your needle, and then that's a process in itself to get going again. So. So before you do any sewing of the ribbons on, in order to determine the length of your skirt, you just want to measure from where it's going to sit on your waist to where you want it to end. Now that we've already done the bottom hem, you can cut your piece on the top to determine the length. You just want to keep an extra 3 inches on top because we're going to fold the fabric over in order to do the waistline. So from where it's going to sit to where you want it to end plus 3 inches. So once you finish your hem, you're going to take your ribbons and cut all the pieces that you need. So for my design, my pattern, I'm going to use all 5 of the ribbons that were provided, and I'm going to double them up. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you just measure depending on, well, actually you'll do it same for both ways. So you just want to leave a little bit on the extra on the end so you know that you have enough. I usually leave a little bit extra on both ends. And you want to make sure you cut your ribbons for both pieces of your skirt, that way it's all done. So because I'm doubling up on my pattern, I need 2 for the front piece and 2 for the back, so that's 4 pieces total. And depending on the size of skirt that you're making, you see that there's plenty of ribbon. There's 5 meters of each of the colors in your packs. So I still have a lot left. And because I'm doing this hanging ribbon style, I also want to cut an extra piece to sew on the side at the end. So the way that I learned and taught myself how to do, I just cut like a small piece about 10 inches because I'm going to fold it in half at the end. And then that's what is going to hang from the side. So I kind of just cut one piece and then use that as a guide for the rest. So I will need 4 of these pieces as well because I cut 4 of the bigger pieces. And you don't have to do it this way. If you don't feel like you'll have enough ribbon for it, you don't have to panic. Yeah, so once I get everything cut out, I will show you how to sew them on. So you can stop. So I have all of my ribbon cut out here for both pieces. These are my extra little fringe pieces. If you're not going to have fringe on the side, don't worry about this extra little piece. Just cut out what you need for your skirt. You don't have to use all of the ribbon. You can just use 4 if you want. You can use them all. It's up to you. One thing I forgot to mention was the piece of material that we have, they're all about 2 meters. Whenever you're making a skirt, you always want to have at least 2 meters so you know that you have enough. Unless you're making a bigger skirt, like a more like 4X plus skirt, you're probably going to need a little bit more than that. So then just get 3 meters, but 2 meters is usually plenty. So yeah, so when I put the ribbons on, I usually just pin the one. Some people get frustrated and overwhelmed. They think they have to pin everything and glue everything. You don't. I just want to show you the easiest way for you to do this. And if you don't have a sewing machine, that's totally fine. You can do this like hand sewn. It would be simple to follow all of these steps just hand sewing. It's going to take you a little longer, but you'll still have the same outcome. So for me, I usually go about 4 or 5, depending on how low you want your ribbons. So for this skirt, I'm going to go 4.5 inches from the bottom is where I'm going to place my first ribbon. So it just says 4.5 inches here, and then I'm going to pin it. Oops. And then like I did with my bottom hem, I'm just going to use about 4 pins just so I know it'll be stable. You can use more, you can use less. And you just want to make sure it's even all the way across. And you see it doesn't take anything fancy to make a ribbon skirt. I'm just sitting on my kitchen floor. So now that I have both sides of my skirt pinned, the front piece and the back piece, I am going to sew. So now I'm ready to sew. I have everything lined up straight. I usually use just a plain white thread, but I actually have invisible thread. That's what I prefer. Some people like to color match. It's totally up to you. White's fine. The way I usually start out, I'll do a straight stitch all the way across the bottom. And then when I sew the other ribbons on, I'll do a zigzag stitch to sew them together. That just makes it easier and quicker. You're not constantly trying to sew straight lines. And yeah, I'll show you a little bit more once I get to that part. Alright, so now I did my straight stitch across. I know I told you guys to take your pins out, but you can see there's a little bit of a space there, so my needle wasn't going right over it. I usually leave them in when I'm doing this part just so I know nothing's going to move. So now that I have that bottom part sewn down, I'll take the ribbons out and then I'll line my fabric up again. And then I usually just keep my ribbons close by me here in the order that I'm going to sew them down so they're easy to grab and then I can keep going. So now I'm going to switch my sewing machine to zigzag stitch, and then I'm just going to lay this ribbon down beside and line everything up in the middle so I know you can kind of see both of them in the middle there. Once I start sewing, it's going to catch both sides. And then that's just easier instead of having to sew one straight line here and then again for this one it cuts the time in half. So here we go. And as I'm going, I just want to make sure that everything's in line. I don't want to have my ribbon too far apart because then it's not going to catch both of them. And you don't want it so close together and overlapping or it's going to kind of tug and pull it together and just be a little bit too bunched up. And then just go whichever speed is comfortable for you. It's not a race. Once you start rushing, that's when you start making mistakes. But now you can see they're both sewn together side by side, and I'm just going to continue on with all the rest of the ribbons. So now that I have the ribbons sewed on both of my skirts, I'm at the part where I'm going to sew the side ribbons on. If you're not going to have the dangling ribbons on the side, you can skip this step. This is just for those of you who want this. So I used to sew it together as one piece, and then I decided to do something different and sew it on after. This is what I've recently started doing. When I would sew it on as one piece, it would still be there, so I would just fold it in when I would sew the sides together. So then that's led me to taking my piece, folding it so the shiny side is on the outside. And then I just fold it in half and then I line it up on the edge here with the corresponding color. And then I just pin it in so it stays there. And then I do that with all of the colors on both of the sides. I only do it on the one side of the skirt just because I found that the easiest way. So I'll pin all of them on this side, then all of them on this side, and then I'll just sew a straight line across closest to the edge. So I'll do that on both sides before grabbing the second piece and sewing it together. So now I'm at the part where I'm going to sew the fringes on the sides. I put my pins in upside down, but that doesn't matter, so. It's kind of going to make a little clunky sound, but that's just because it's going through so many layers of material. So don't be scared. And then just remember to take your pins out as you go. You just want to make sure everything's staying lined up. I usually don't ever use pins or measure anything. I kind of just wing it. So it's just making it a little bit difficult for me, but they will be very helpful if you haven't sewed or you're not as confident to freestyle it, I guess. So now we have just like a nice even line here with all our ribbons on. And then you'll see how it looks after we're done. Right now, I'm just gonna lay this down and we are ready. You always want to make sure that these are in, because if they're laying out on the side, it's going to get stuck when you sew your two pieces together and it's not going to turn out right. So you'll have your matching piece, and then now we're just going to put the two pieces together and we're going to sew them together. So what I usually do, you want to make sure the bottom hem's lined up and all your ribbons are matching. Make sure these guys are folded over out of the way as well. And then you're just gonna pin it. So I usually pin the ribbons about 3 places so they're lined up. And I'll pin it a little bit over so I can just sew freely and know that it's not gonna move. So you'll just sew the one side and then you'll go and sew the other side. So now I'm just gonna sew my sides together. I've pinned where my ribbons line up. I want them to match up together. And I'm just going to sew a straight line all the way down. So now that we sewed the sides together, we're on the second last step. We're going to do the waist. So you can hem the top again if you want to. We did leave those 3 extra inches. You're just going to fold it over. Have it inside out still. You're going to fold it over. And then, like I said, those 3 inches, you just want to make sure that the band is even all the way across. It depends how you cut it. Mine's a little bit wavy here, but it's okay. I usually like to leave just enough room for the elastic. I'm going to do a paper bag waist. You don't have to. You can just sew the bottom if you want, but the paper bag waist, I'm going to sew the top and the bottom. So I usually sew like 3/4 of an inch from the top. There's my child in the background. Hold on. So I'll make it even, I'll put my pins in, and then I'll sew the top part first, and that I'll sew it at 3/4 of an inch all the way around. So I'll do my pins and then I'll show you that. So when I'm doing the waistline, I usually take this part off of my machine. It's just easier for my skirt to wrap around. So you want to make sure that you're not sewing it together, otherwise you won't be able to get in your skirt. So I'm going to line it up here. Like I said, about 3/4 of an inch. You can use your little guides on your sewing machine. And this is just going to be a straight stitch all the way around, and it's going to come and overlap itself. So. So here we're getting to the end. Our stitch should line up directly with where we started. And there is the first part. And you always want to trim all your little excess threads, otherwise they're going to get in the way and your skirt's not going to look as neat. And then now I'll move on to the second part. So I usually start in the same spot. And now what I'm gonna do, I usually follow along with the bottom here. You can do it however you like. You just want to make sure you have enough room for the elastic. So the elastic that we got in our little skirt kits, it's about 1 inch. So there's definitely enough room here. Sometimes if the elastic's smaller, I just give it just enough room so it doesn't twist around when I'm wearing my skirt. So I'm just gonna go ahead and sew this second part. Using this little line right here as a guide. So even though I kind of cut it a little bit wavy, I know it's gonna be straight because I'm following this guide here. And you can see we're getting close to the end here where we first started. You don't want to go all the way to the end. You want to leave about 1 inch because that's where you're going to put your elastic in for your waist. Okay, so here I am. A little bit of reinforcement. And then I'm just going to trim all my threads off and then I'll show you how to put in the elastic. So now's the last step, the elastic. We've got more than enough. So for myself, I'll usually put it to where it touches together and then I'll stretch it or I'll pull it tight just a little bit and that's where I'll cut it. I don't want it too loose because over time it's going to loosen up and then I don't want it so tight that it's going to cut me in half. So I just put the two ends together, pull it a bit, and then that's where I'm going to cut it. So here is my excess piece, and this is the piece I'm going to use. So I use a safety pin, put it through there. It just makes it easier to pull through your skirt. So then that little, that little opening that you left, wherever I left it, right here, that is where you're gonna put your elastic through. So put the safety pin in right through that little hole here. And then you're just gonna pull it. So now I'm getting to the end with my elastic. I just wanna pull my safety pin through. And here's my elastic. I'm just gonna separate this a bit so it's evenly distributed. And then as you're doing this, you just wanna go along and make sure your elastic's all the same way. If it's twisted, if it's half one way and half the other way, it's just going to be really uncomfortable. And same with at the end, you want to make sure they lie evenly together. When you do this part, you can pin it together and try it on to see if you need to trim it a bit. Like as for myself, I think I might need to cut it just a little bit. So I'm just going to wing it and do that. But now I have my two pieces together and I'm just gonna sew it. So I usually do a zigzag stitch just because it holds it together more. So I just go back and forth however many times so you know it's gonna hold together. And then you're gonna spread it apart again so this will get tucked in. You can sew this little piece you left open shut if you want. I usually don't ever sew it shut just because you don't see it. And if you ever want to change the waist of your elastic, if you need to make it looser, or sorry, if you need to make it tighter, if you need a little bit more elastic, you can always just cut this piece and then sew on an extra piece of an elastic, or just put in a whole new elastic. So now I have that. I'm gonna turn my skirt inside out, or right side out, I should say. And there it is. I have my elastic, I have all my ribbons, and my ribbons are dangling on the side. The final step is to just trim these. So you want to make sure you have it the right way before you cut it. So I usually take it like this and I fold it upwards, and then I'll cut it upwards. So fold it upwards and cut it upwards, and then you have that little point there. You can cut it straight if you want, whatever you like. And then you just want to make sure it's even all the way down. And then what I usually do to finish is I just take a lighter and I just lightly burn the edges here, a little bit far away because it melts pretty quick. You don't want to melt it and make it deformed, but you burn that and then the ribbon's not going to fray. So you do that all the way along, and then you'll have your finished skirt. So hopefully my video was easy to follow along. It's my first time doing a teaching video, but I wanted to do this for you guys so you can learn how to make skirts at home. I'm very happy with my end result, and I hope you guys are too. So once you finish your skirts, if you could send them to us, Musqueam Health Services Facebook page, and then we can feature you guys on our page. So I hope you enjoy, and feel free to pause and restart, and yeah, I hope you liked our class.